Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Kalina, and welcome back to Don't Quote Me on That, where we kind of talk about movies. I didn't want to leave you all hanging this week. As you can tell, it's just me again, and I was racking my brain for the longest time about what to talk about. I asked my mom to record me, I asked my dad to record me, I asked my 17-year-old brother, which I will tell you, very humbling experience to have to ask your 17-year-old brother for a favor, to record me, and no one wanted to record with Kalina. I don't know what I ever did to them, okay, but I will tell you, I'm not doing any favors for the foreseeable future. So if any of you are listening to this, take that to heart. But yeah, I was racking my brain to what to record. I just was not feeling very inspired any which way. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. So what I decided to chit chat about, which is shouldn't be too long, which I always say, and it's always way longer than I think it will be, is I am going to go see Jackson Browne with my dad in a couple weeks. He loves Jackson Browne. It's his favorite singer in the whole entire world ever. He thinks the guy is great. And I think the guy is good too. The problem is, I have only ever heard one Jackson Browne song in my life, and I think it's really depressing, right? Which I said that to my dad, and he was like, "You would call that song depressing? I call it realistic." And things can be two things, you know? So I'm just going to give a little history about Jackson Browne. I'm going to talk about the one song by him I know, and then I'll let you get out of here because I have to work in the morning and I'm tired. So, per the Wikipedia page, his name is Clyde Jackson Browne. He's an American rock musician, singer, songwriter, and political activist. And he used to write songs for other people. The song, technically I know another song by Jackson Browne. I've never heard Jackson Browne sing it because Jackson Browne co-wrote the song Take It Easy by the Eagles. And if you are a fan of this podcast, or if you've met me in real life, you know I love the Eagles. And also, I'm pretty sure everyone's heard Take It Easy. Besides Hotel California, I feel like Take It Easy, maybe Tequila Sunrise, or up there in terms of most popular Eagles songs. So, Take It Easy. And then he released his self-titled debut album in 1972, which had Dr. My Eyes, which I've heard of before. So maybe I've heard two Jackson Browne songs, guys. I'm not going to talk about Dr. My Eyes because I definitely don't know well enough to do that. But listen, I learned something new today. So, those are the important. Here's Somebody's Baby. I know that song. Guys, I think I like Jackson Browne. I know it's literally 3 songs, but I do like those songs. And apparently Somebody's Baby was in the film Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I have never seen, but I do like Pierce the Veil's song Fast Times at Claremont High. Very good song, 10 out of 10. I think I've talked about it before in my Pierce the Veil episode. So if you want to hear me talk about that, you can tune into that one. Anyway, the Jackson Browne song that I heard and that I know is Lives in the Balance, which, what's a good way to describe this song? I think it very much, is a good example of Jackson Browne as a political activist, not just as a musician. And also I think it's a really good example of him as a songwriter also. I think it's a very well-written song. I think it does exactly what it needs to do. It really cuts to the heart. And I think it's depressing. Not in a bad way. I just think it's a little depressing, which we will see why later. So apparently Lives in the Balance was also his 8th studio album, released in 1986. My man was released 8 albums between 1972 and 1986. But the song has a dark theme. This is per Wikipedia again. The song has a dark theme, and lyrically it is about a country lying to its people and war. And so basically it is about war and how what is presented to, particularly America, what's presented to the American people about why we're at war and what's happening in the war is very different than the reality, which I think is something we have a better idea of now, and people are a lot more active and intentional about finding out what's really going on, or, you know, not even what's really going on, but getting both sides of the story, because you can get the same information presented two different ways, you know? So I do think now, not, and I don't want to just say like this generation, but just in general, people nowadays are more intentional about where they get their information and how they let that affect them, or how that impacts their opinions. So a little bit of history for the song, per Wikipedia again. Months before the Iran-Contra scandal broke in the press, according to the 1989 Rolling Stone article, The 100 Best Albums of the 80s, Browne sang on Lives in the Balance of wanting to know who the men in the shadows are. I like this line. I want to hear somebody asking them why. After the arms for hostages deals hit the news, the increased public awareness of the U.S. government's covert war in Nicaragua prompted Browne to produce and pay for a video for Lives in the Balance well after the album had passed its peak in terms of sales. Discussing the song at the time of the video's release, Browne said, I implied that the truth is kept from us on a regular basis. I flat out say the government lies. Well, these things are no longer hearsay. Which reminds me, because I was talking about this earlier today, him saying that reminds me of the Hadestown song. I mean, are we surprised I brought this back to a Broadway musical? I am, actually. I'm quite impressed that I managed to do that. But it reminds me of Why We Build the Wall from Hadestown, which I know a lot of people thought she wrote because of Donald Trump wanting to build the wall, when it turns out she wrote that. I think she wrote that concept album in like 2012. But even if it wasn't then, she wrote it like years and years before Donald Trump was even like a blip on the radar in terms of politics. And in Why Do We Build the Wall, Hades is saying, like, it's like a call and response sort of situation. So Hades says, like, why do we build the wall, my children, and the workers are like, oh, we build the wall to keep us free. And he's like, and how does that wall keep us free? And they're like, oh, well, the wall keeps out the enemy. And he's like, and who's the enemy? And they're like, oh, well, the enemy is poverty, and so the wall keeps out the enemy, and we build the wall to keep us free. And then later on, he's like, and what do we have that they want? Why are they the enemy? And they're like, oh, well, we have this wall to work upon. So basically, we have work, even though later in the show, these workers realize, they literally say, why are we digging our own graves for a living? They're working themselves to death for nothing. Like, they're forgetting who they are when they were not in the underworld. They're forgetting their names and their personalities and what they liked. They know nothing but this work. That is all they do day in and day out, is work and work and work to build this wall, to keep out this enemy that doesn't really exist. And like, poverty, yes, does exist, but it exists because it was created by the same man who's essentially having them work on the wall to keep out poverty, you know? But that's a Broadway musical that we're not talking about right now. So I just wanted to go through the song, Lives in the Balance. I think the best way to like explain it to you is to read the lyrics. So he opens up and he says, I've been waiting for something to happen for a week or a month or a year, with the blood in the ink of the headlines and the sound of the crowd in my ear. And I really like with the blood in the ink of the headlines, because going back to that, you can get information presented to you in a variety of ways and form a very different opinion on it, even if it's the same information, just depending on where you get it from. So like, not only is there blood in the headlines in terms of we're hearing these awful, terrible stories, but there's blood in the headlines of sometimes like there might be an agenda, or the way we're presented the information is contributing to more blood being spilled. And like, there's blood on our hands, or blood on the hands of the people who write the headlines, because they're, I don't want to say covering up the truth, but Jackson Browne quite flat out said they're covering up the truth. Even if like they don't realize they are, the headline is like putting like a pretty bow on a grave, you know? So there's blood in the ink of the headlines. And then he says, you might ask what it takes to remember when you know that you've seen it before, where a government lies to its people and a country is drifting to war. I feel like that's pretty, I don't really have too much to say about that one, I'll be honest. You know, a sense of deja vu. And what do they say? Like, history is doomed to be repeated by the people who forget it, or something like that. Like, I think it's very easy to brush off, especially now. I think it's a lot of times people are like, oh, America would never do that again, or we would never do that again, because like we've learned, we're better. But I think because sometimes we get so focused on fixing other problems. And this is like purely hypothetical metaphor, example, whatever you want to call it. But like, let's say we're worried about war crimes, but now we're like, okay, well, we've addressed that. We know, here's my hypothetical. Okay, Pangea, that's my country. Okay, Pangea, we know they committed war crimes. But now that we've addressed that and, taken them to court, so to speak, for that purpose, now we can focus on climate change. Okay, we need to focus on climate change, and we need to start with Pangea because Pangea needs to reduce their carbon emissions, yada, yada, yada. And while we're so focused on this big picture thing, that is very important, yes. Those things that we have dismissed as being solved because it's not an issue you can ever solve are sneaking it back on us again. Does that make sense? I hope so. And then he says, so where a government lies to its people and a country is drifting to war. We kind of get this like pre-chorus. He goes, there's a shadow on the faces of the men who send the guns to the wars that are fought in places where their business interest runs. So like, it's what it says on the tin, okay? These men will forever be stained and tainted and haunted by the horrors they are inflicting and enacting and enabling in these countries that they probably never go to, but it benefits them. They make money off of destroying those countries and those people, but that's neither here nor there to them. I think it never becomes tangible to them, and so war is not tangible to them because they don't have to live with it. They don't have to face it every day. They face the money that they make off of perpetuating these wars. I normally wouldn't say things like this, but Jackson Browne has inspired me because he flat out was like, and he has a much more public platform than I do. But again, this is all hypothetical, and I'm talking about Pangea. And these next lines that I'm going to read are Jackson Browne's lyrics. I just want the government to know that Jackson Browne wrote this, not Kalina. He says, you hear one thing again and again, how the USA stands for freedom, and we come to the aid of a friend. But who are the ones that we call our friends? These governments killing their own are the people who finally can't take anymore, and they pick up a gun or a brick or a stone. And so, you're only as good as the company you keep. Even if Pangea, my hypothetical country, is doing all it can and they are living by the book. You know what? Here's a better example. I've seen this argument quite a few times in terms of men, and when people say, well, it's not all men. Yes, but if there is 10 men in a room and 9 of them are good and trustworthy, but there's one bad guy in there and none of the 9 do anything to stop him, then you have 10 bad men. Or I've also seen that same argument for cops. If you've got 9 good cops and 1 bad cop, but none of the 9 cops hold that 1 cop accountable, you've got 10 bad cops. You have a cop problem. It's not an individual problem. It's a cop problem. So, again, going back to if we have 10 countries, 9 of them are good, 1 is killing their own people, and the 9 countries are like, well, we're still going to make alliances with you because you're not killing our people. You're no better than the 1 country. And then we go to the chorus, and he says, and there are lives in the balance. There are people under fire. There are children at the cannons, and there is blood on the wire. I always thought he said there was blood on the walls, which I think is much more visceral. And I know it doesn't really go with the rhyme scheme, because he says fire. It's like not quite an A-B. I guess it's like an A-B-C-B sort of rhyme scheme. Anyway, fire and wire. But I always thought he said walls, which I thought was much better, but I get why he says wire. But after hearing that, do you understand why I said this was a depressing song? Is it true? Yes. But I think this song is very, very visceral, and I've always found it very easy to visualize the things he is saying. Like, there are children at the cannons. I can picture that. I can picture blood on the walls, even though there's blood on the wire. But I can picture the blood on the walls. That's depressing. It's true, sure. As my dad said, that's reality, sweetheart. But it shouldn't be. It's awful that it is reality. What's depressing about it is that it is reality. That's the depressing part. And then we go back to, there's a shadow on the faces of the men who fan the flames of the wars that are fought in places we can't even say their names. So again, this war, is negligible to us. It's neither here nor there because it's a second thought. It's not even a consideration in our brains. We can't say the names of these countries. We might not even know the names of these countries. We might not even know these countries exist, let alone there's people there who have lives that are worthy of living. To be killed and to be sent to war and to send their little children off to operate cannons and die in a war that no one asked for. None of them asked for, at least. And then, again, Jackson Browne, the American singer-songwriter, says, "They sell us the president the same way they sell us our clothes and our cars. They sell us everything from youth to religion, the same time they sell us our wars." And not to sound like I went to liberal arts school and did a liberal arts degree, but like, yeah, they sell us everything. You can't escape it. You have the illusion of choice, that's like a trick you learn in like sales, like you can't give open-ended options. You have to give them one or two, make them think they're making a choice, but really you've narrowed down the choices for them. They might have, like, let's say you're booking an appointment. You might have from 9 to 2 free. You don't go, "Oh, do you want, we have time from 9 to 2. When would work for you?" You don't do that. You give them the illusion of a choice by saying, "Oh, well, I've got, a 10 a.m. or a 2 p.m. Which one of those works better for you?" So they think they're making the decision when really you've already narrowed it down to what you want them to choose from. Illusion of choice. This is all about like the shiny kind of like a mist. What's the word? Oasis. You're in the desert and that you see that not fuzzy, but like you're in the desert and you see that hazy kind of waving picture in the background of paradise. And you get there and you realize it was just more sand. That's what this song is about. But that people are doing that intentionally. And then we go back to the line I mentioned earlier from the Wikipedia article. "I want to know who the men in the shadows are. I want to hear somebody asking them why. They can be counted on to tell us who our enemies are, but they're never the ones to fight or to die." Again, what it says on the tin. Especially if we think about that businessman line earlier, where like the wars are fought in these places where they have business interests. So it's very easy for them to stand there and go, "Yeah, these people are evil and horrible, and this person or this country or this culture poses a threat to society and life as we know it, and yada yada yada. We must do something about it." But you'll never see them go there and do something about it themselves, and they never take, I don't want to say peaceful, they never take small steps first. It's always the biggest possible step first. What should be the last resort is always the first resort for them. And again, also I like what he says, "I want to know who the men in the shadows are," when he says earlier there's a shadow on the faces of the men who fan the flame. So it's they're one and the same. There's no, and I like he makes it, while he may not call you out by name, he also like is not shying away from who he's talking about. And then we go back to, "And there are lives in the balance. There are people under fire. There are children at the cannons, and there is blood on the wire." Jackson Browne, I know you wrote the song years and years ago, but I really think "Blood on the Walls" would be a sicker line. But that's just me. Anyway, that's "Lives in the Balance" by Jackson Browne. I am very excited to see this live. And now that I've learned that I know other songs by Jackson Browne, I'm very excited to see those. Apparently this song was used in 2 separate episodes of Miami Vice. And it also appears in the Bill Moyers television documentary, "The Secret Government, The Constitution in Crisis," which I am sure tackles all the same points I did. But I gave them to you in, I think, a more fun way and definitely a shorter and more digestible way. So take that. Secret Government and the Constitution in Crisis. If you all like this, I know it was really short, but if you all like this, or if you like Jackson Browne, like, comment below. Let me know. I would be willing to do some more Jackson Browne stuff, especially after the concert. Let me hear his stuff. I'm gonna do like a little bit of a deep dive, maybe a week or 2 before I go see him, and just get myself familiar with his work, so I'm not going in completely blind. But like I said, now that I know I actually do know a couple more songs by him than I realized, I'm really excited about this. I think it'll be a good time. My dad really likes him. I think it'll be fun to, hang out with him. So thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week for sure. Hopefully Eleanor will be here, but if not, you guys will have me chit-chatting about something fun, something or the other. And yeah, you guys take care. Have a great weekend. And you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Don't Quote Us on that, and on Twitter at Don't Quote Us 27. I'm really fun there. I love chit-chatting. Let me know what's going on. I want to talk to you guys. Enjoy yourselves. Bye. Thanks for listening. Don't quote me on that. One day we'll have an outro, but it's not today.